Okay, good morning Year 10 and 11. We are going to talk today about Language Paper 1, Question 4. As I'm showing you this video, I'd like you to write down the steps that I take to answer the question. This question is a really important question because it uses a skill of evaluation. To evaluate means to consider or study something carefully and decide how good or bad, true or false it is. For this question, you need to either agree, disagree, or partially agree with the statement. A really important part of this question is once you've decided whether you agree or disagree with the statement, that you need to provide evidence. For example, you'd never complain about a meal in a restaurant without providing evidence to the restaurant about why you are complaining. So you'd need to be able to tell them it's cold, it's tasteless, I'm allergic to this ingredient. It's exactly the same for this question. You need to back up what you are saying with proof. This question is 20 marks. It's really important that we spend enough time on this question. So I'd like you to make sure that you spend at least 25 minutes on this question. Also, it is very key to plan. You cannot answer this question. You cannot get 20 out of 20, which we're all aiming for, without planning. Let's have a look at this question. So it says, focus this part of your answer on the second half of the source from line 16 to the end. Now, a really important thing to know, Year 10 and 11, is that although it says line 16 to the end, we can use evidence from elsewhere in the source, but it's really important to be able to find quotes from those lines in particular. Let's have a look at the statement now. Remember, we need to evaluate this statement. A student said, this part of the story set during breakfast time shows that Alex is struggling to cope with his mother's illness. To what extent do you agree? In your response, you could consider your own impressions of Alex, evaluate how the writer shows that Alex is struggling to cope, support your response with references to the text. Let's have a look at those key parts of this question then. So I wonder what the key parts are. First part is the statement. This is key. Now I need to evaluate this. To evaluate something properly, I need to expose the different parts of it. So I'm going to break the statement down. So let's have a look. Part of the story set during breakfast time. I can cross that bit out because that's not important. Here we go. Shows that Alex is struggling to cope. And then it's his mother's illness that is causing him to struggle. So I'm going to label these up as 1 and 2. To what extent do you agree? Now the word extent tells me that I can disagree, I can agree, and I can partially agree. So I can agree with part of it, but I can also find reasons why we might disagree with it. In your response, you could consider your own impressions of Alex. Own impressions means own words, so I need to be able to say in my own words what my impression of Alex is. Evaluate how the writer shows that Alex is struggling to cope. Whenever you see the word how, it is telling me that I need to look for methods. That is things like language devices, words, phrases, and structural features. Now the last one, support your response with references to the text. That's the evidence that I spoke about earlier. It is so important to be able to find evidence. What I need to do next is move on now to look at step 2. Now I'm thinking about, as I go through the extract, shows that Alex is struggling to cope. Do I agree, disagree, or partially agree with that? And the second one, is it his mother's illness that is causing him to struggle? I've already read this source to answer questions 1, 2, and 3, so I know it really well by now. I know that at the beginning Alex has a nightmare, and I know that then there's this, in the second paragraph here, he wakes up from the storm. Now, actually, I think that potentially the only thing I can pick out that shows Alex might be struggling to cope is that he is having a nightmare. People who struggle to cope often, we know, suffer with nightmares. So that might be one reason. I'm going to put a 1 there because it's the first part of my statement. It's here that he is struggling to cope. So I'm going to put that, but actually the rest of it I can just cross out because I'm going to move on to the main part of the extract. Let's have a look from here then. So Alexander looked at the clock, 6:30, time to get up. I'm going to skim and scan. Can I see any correct? Yeah, okay. This was going to be a terrible day. People who struggle to cope often have a negative view of that. And I think I like this one. It's best to stay in bed. Let me keep skimming and scanning. I'm not reading this in loads of detail, but actually I like this quote as well. Sometimes the air in the house felt heavy, like being at the bottom of the sea. That shows he's really struggling to cope. It's almost like, I'm going to make some notes in my margin here. It's almost like he's drowning. It's like he's overwhelmed. Sorry about my handwriting. Let's keep going. At breakfast, he was not in the mood. He was in a bad mood to applaud his father's efforts. Oh, his dad's making pancakes for him, but he's not in the mood. I think maybe that shows he's potentially a little bit irrational, because his dad's trying to do something nice and he's so kind of upset, maybe about his mother, that he can't even see the good in what his father is trying to do. Okay, those are the only quotes I like there. Let's keep going. Let's keep scanning. So I know here, like as I said in question 3, there's dialogue. And I'm actually going to zoom in on this quote here. Alex says, "Shut up, Nicole," when his sister asks about the mum. I like that. And I think that's, again, number 1, that he's struggling to cope because he's snapping. He's got bad relationships with his family. Okay. Let's keep going. I think I'm just going to skim and look at this quote. He was angry with his father, his sister's life in general, even with his mother for getting sick. Now that is somebody who's really kind of upset. I'm going to come back to that quote. And actually this one here as well, he rushed out of the kitchen. That shows me Alex is really just desperate to escape. So I'm finding all this time, all this evidence to think, do I agree or disagree that he's struggling to cope? At the moment, I think I'm agreeing. Let's keep going. Now, I know at the end of the extract we get a little bit more on the mother, so I'm going to skip to that. I don't need loads of quotes, so I'm just going to look here. Now, remember that here we've got kind of a cross between the past and the present. We have flashbacks. I wrote about that in question 3. We have flashbacks, but we also have kind of the juxtaposition between past and present. And I know in here there's a couple of quotes that really describe how the mother's changed. I'm going to go straight to this one. Her canvases, which once were explosions of colour, sat forgotten on their easel, and her oil paints dried in their tubes. His mother seemed to have shrunk. She was little more than a silent ghost. Now, that is all describing the mother's illness. She has changed as a person. We know that she was an artist. She makes music, flowers, she makes cookies, she's very welcoming. But now she's a much more kind of quiet person. And even here, she's a silent ghost. I'm going to come back to that. So let me go back to my question. Now I'm looking at step 3. I'm planning. I broke down the statement into Alex is struggling to cope and it's his mother's illness. Do I agree or disagree with each part of those statements? Actually, here I think I agree with both. So I agree that his mother is, that he's struggling to cope because of he's snapping and things like that. And I agree actually it is because of his mother's illness, because the writer paints a really positive picture of the mother beforehand. You know, she's got easy laughter, she's affectionate, but now she's changed. Okay. The last thing that I need to do then is make a quick plan. So you can just sketch it out really quickly on your exam paper. It doesn't need, doesn't need to be neat. But I've just typed it up to make it a little bit clearer for you. You need to plan out for your opinion. Now remember it says your own impressions in the question, so that's where I use my own words. We said how important evidence is, so that's there. And then methods, that's things like language devices, words, structure. Okay, so the first thing that I do, and I'm going to show you very briefly how I've done it, I've put into my own words here my opinion on the parts of the statement. Here's part 1 where Alex is struggling to cope, and I said I agree because he has nightmares, he's irrational and he snaps at his family. And the second part, I agree that it's his mother's illness that's causing him to struggle because she's changed. She was once vibrant and is now very different, which must be very hard for Alex, especially because he's the oldest sibling. The last thing I need to do, I've got loads of quotes here, I can't use them all. So I need to pick my best, I would say 3 for each part of the statement. So here we go. I found "Shut up, Nicole." Alex was angry with his father, his sister's life in general, and he rushed out of the kitchen. And I found these quotes here. Pause it if you need to have a look at them for the second part. Now the last thing that I need to do is find methods. You'd do this with every quote, but I'm just going to show you how I do it with a couple. So for example, "Shut up, Nicole," Alex replied. Methods is things like language devices, sentence forms, words, phrases, structural features. I've got a short sentence there which shows he's really snapping. And you'd go through each one and zoom in. And then this one here, for example, he rushed out the kitchen. I've got that verb rushed, which shows he really wants to escape. He wants to escape from the kitchen, which represents the family home. He's not happy. And then, for example, this one here, and you do it with all of them, she was little more than a silent ghost. We've got a metaphor, which really shows actually a silent ghost is almost, ghosts make me think of death. They make me think of sadness. They make me think of someone who's not there, and that's amplified by the adjective silent. And I would say some really nice zooms about that question. Now, the next thing that you need to do is turn your great plans into a piece of writing. I'm going to do a separate video on this, but thank you for listening. Well done. Make sure that you plan for this question, otherwise you will not get those 20 marks. Thank you for listening.